and I am Jeremy Domingo, Jamie's partner for this summit. Together, we will moderate the exciting segments of this first ever First World Innovation and Benchmarking Summit. Now, we will have speakers from 6 different countries: New Zealand, Canada, the US, Ecuador, the UAE, and the Philippines. Now, we look forward to your active engagement during our speaker sessions, panel discussions, and the Hackathon Challenge. Let us now begin this exciting and exhilarating 2020 learning adventure.
To formally open today's event, let us welcome the President of the Philippine Society for Quality, Dr. Ray Fremista.
We all recognize that COVID-19 is one of the biggest shocks to the world in decades. 2020 has been a year full of changes. In our hyper-connected, fast-changing world, we are being fed with overwhelming news alerts, information, and even rumors about this pandemic. It's easy to lose perspective and even conclude that the world is not up to managing the situation. We are all dealing with a crisis that brings new challenges every day. For the past 8 months or so, this has compressed our lives to mostly our computer screens and our homes. We humans are most comfortable when we're connected, so it's been difficult not being able to see each other. As we slowly emerge out of the COVID-19 pandemic situation, quality and business transformation leaders are truly being put to task. Companies have shifted operations towards remote work. Interactions across digital interfaces are growing rapidly, along with the rising reliance on data and machines. Digital transformation is one of the keys to future-proofing business and uncovering new market opportunities. Long-established players in industries have seen their organizations go through massive shifts, or at worst, go out of business, as up-and-coming businesses with a more digital approach have disrupted the status quo. Adopting this Industry 4.0 technologies like AI has become a strategic imperative. Early adopters are achieving massive returns, while those who wait risk falling behind. We are truly all in this together. I believe we will emerge from this crisis stronger and more resilient than before. I have great confidence in all of you and in our ability to come out the other side stronger and better positioned than ever. I'm more than glad to see new levels of motivation, vigor, confidence, and optimism across the world. Let us channel all that powerful energy to deliver excellence and innovation that we can all be proud of. Let me take this opportunity to thank the board of the Philippine Society for Quality and the Global Benchmarking Network, to the judges and assessors of the Duran Medal, the Quality Manager of the Year Award with the Chairman, Angelica Fraginal, and the PSQ Excellence Awards with the Chairman, Noli Kayabyab. I also want to take this time to thank all our sponsors for today: Call Miner, Asus Business, Minitab, ACF Consultancy and Training Services, San Miguel Yamamura Packaging Corporation, and Alson's Power Group. I also want to greet everyone a happy World Quality Month and happy Thanksgiving. I wish you and your loved ones continued good health and welcome to the First World Innovation and Benchmarking Summit. Magandang umaga and mabuhay.
Dear friends, we are now honored to have with us the chairman of the Global Network, zooming in from New Zealand. Let's all have a warm welcome for Dr. Robin Mann.
Hi, good afternoon from New Zealand, and good morning to everybody in the Philippines. And I'm not sure where everybody else is in the world, but good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. First of all, I'd like to thank the Philippine Society of Quality for this opportunity for the GBN to partner with them for this very special conference. Could you share my slides, please? Is that possible? Could we go to the next slide, please? So what I'd like to do, I've got a brief welcome speech of around 10 minutes, and I just want to introduce you to what the GBN is and what we do, and then really talk about benchmarking and particularly its importance in today's world in this COVID environment. So the GBN is a global network of organisations and experts focused on promoting and facilitating the use of benchmarking and sharing of best practices worldwide. 19 countries are represented in the GBN, including the Philippine Society of Quality. We want a presence all around the world because benchmarking is so key to a country's development and the development of organisations in those countries. And the organisations that represent their countries are those organisations that pledge to promote benchmarking and encourage benchmarking and the sharing of best practices in those countries and internationally. So if you're interested and you're from a country that's not currently represented, then please get in touch with me or the board of the GBN through the Global Benchmarking Network website. Next slide, please. The Honorary Lifetime President of the GBN is Dr. Robert Camp. He did the pioneering work on benchmarking at Xerox in the 1980s, where they introduced a 10-step benchmarking methodology. He also wrote the first book on benchmarking in 1989, The Search for Industry Best Practices. He's now retired, but he's still involved in the GBN, and he wishes everybody who's attending this conference the best of success this year and in future years. The GBN itself, is helping to promote benchmarking worldwide. We collaborate amongst our members. We have research projects. We have an annual benchmarking conference, and we have a global benchmarking award. And I believe later on you'll be hearing from one organisation which has won the global benchmarking award in the past. Next slide, please. So benchmarking is applicable to, all organisations, and especially in today's world. And we've seen through benchmarking how whole economies have transformed. The photographs here show that really the transformation of Singapore and the United Arab Emirates into first world countries. From Singapore was born in 1965, and the UAE, I think around probably might get this wrong, around 1971 or 73. But the massive development in those countries, and this has been led through really great leadership, but also a strong focus on excellence and on benchmarking, learning from the best in other countries and in other economies. Next slide, please. So today, for instance, we see that Singapore is number one for many international indicators, such as ease of doing business, transport infrastructure, education system, public sector performance, and global competitiveness. The slide you see in front of you, the graph that you see, is an old slide. It's one I presented many, many years ago at a conference in Indonesia. And this is when Singapore became number one for customer service in the public sector. Previously, it was always Canada that was number one. And after giving this presentation on Singapore's experience, one of the other presenters at the conference was a government minister from Canada. And he came up to me after the presentation and he said, you know what, Robin, do you know the reason why Canada is now number two and Singapore is number one? It's because so many government officials from Singapore came to Canada to learn from them and then take back the best practices, apply them, provided and added additional innovation to make them even better than Canada. So this is what countries do who are serious about benchmarking. The UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is following a similar track, and I've highlighted those because of that, and also because we have a number of speakers from the UAE who will be presenting later on. The thing is, with benchmarking, it's easier to do than ever before because of the access to digital technology. So really, there's no excuse for any government, any country not to be doing benchmarking because of the availability of information and the availability to find best practices. When Xerox did their benchmarking, there was no internet, so it's much harder to quickly improve and advance. Next slide, please. Next slide. So benchmarking today is one of the most popular tools and techniques, and you can see it's not a fad. It's one of the few techniques that's consistently been in the top 10 in the world. Next slide, please. And never has there been a more important time to do benchmarking. And I think all of you must be aware of that. We're all doing benchmarking all the time to find out what is the situation in our country, in comparison to others with respect to the COVID pandemic. So we're all comparing, the COVID dashboard in terms of number of cases, number of deaths, per capita proportion of population, etc., to finding out how we can learn from other countries. And there's a plethora of information now on the internet, sharing data, sharing best practices. And we tried to encapsulate the best practices in a best practice report from the Global Benchmarking Network. It's called the Global Best Practices Benchmarking Initiative on COVID-19. And Dale Weeks, who led that project, will be talking about it later on at the conference. Next slide, please. So quickly, just to summarize, what is benchmarking? Benchmarking is learning from the experience of others. And it's not just learning from others, it's applying that knowledge, which is important. So it's not just finding out what the difference is, it's really delving into that information, talking to people who are responsible for those best practices, finding out what they're doing differently, and then applying them. Next slide, please. There are two main types of benchmarking. One is called informal benchmarking, and one is called formal benchmarking. Informal benchmarking is something that we all do, whether we're conscious of it or not. Attending, the conference today is a type of informal benchmarking where you'll be getting new knowledge based on, learning better practices or approaches that perhaps you've been unfamiliar about before. You can also learn through networking, and more, as I've said, you learn through digital tech. Also through Zoom calls now, which you can contact people from anywhere around the world and speak to them about what they do in their jobs, responsible for. Next slide, please. But there is also formal benchmarking where you plan, your particular approach of how you're going to learn. And there are two main types of that. One is called performance benchmarking, which is comparing performance. So it could be comparing financial performance, environmental performance, or as I've said before, it could be comparing the performance of nations in terms of how they're addressing the COVID pandemic and looking at those COVID dashboards. Performance benchmarking, though, doesn't provide solutions. It doesn't tell you what you need to do to improve. And so this is where the power of best practice benchmarking comes in. And this is where you have specific methodologies designed to help you to understand why another country perhaps is performing better in terms of addressing the COVID pandemic than others. The methodology shown here is called the TRADE Best Practice Benchmarking Methodology, a very systematic approach where, first of all, you identify what challenge you face and develop a terms of reference for the project. You then review your current situation, look at your processes and your current performance, and then you search for best practices, therefore trying to acquire new information, new learning from other organizations. You deploy that learning, and then you evaluate your outcomes. Next slide, please. I think what people don't understand unless they actually do benchmarking is it's such a powerful change management tool. And this is why it's remained so popular over time. Benchmarking, if you've got a big challenge, should be done as a project. So you involve your team members who perhaps have some interest in that particular process. There might be a stakeholder of that process, or a process owner, or a customer, or a supplier of that process. You form a team, you do the project, learning from other organizations, but also you try to bring with you other stakeholders who are not part of the team, but will be impacted by the process. So with a benchmarking project, usually you have a project team and a stakeholders going on a learning journey, trying to find out better ideas, better ways of approaching a particular problem. So this is a vastly different than involvement who prescribe an idea. This is involving people right from the start of the journey to the solution, so they understand where the best practices and ideas come from, and they've been also assisting in generating those ideas and then involved in implementation. And there's a great Confucius saying, tell me I may forget, show me I may remember, involve me and I will understand. This is why benchmarking is so powerful. Next slide, please. The other last thing I'll sort of leave with you really is that people often think benchmarking is just learning from others and that's it. And, they think you just find out what the best practices are and then apply them. That's not the case. As I sort of described on my last slide, is you do have a team and you should involve a larger, wider stakeholder project. And straight away, when you identify a problem, whatever it is, it's human nature automatically to come up with solutions. As soon as you write a problem down, you start thinking of solutions to that problem. And so a benchmarking project is really capturing the ideas of your team and your stakeholders right from the start of a project to the end, but also learning from the best practices of other organizations. So you're combining these two elements together. And when you go on that learning journey, learning from others, it's that combination of your own ideas mixed with what you learn from other organizations, often from totally different industries, gives you new insights, and it gives extra creativity to the best practices that you find, and you add your own ideas to the best practices you find. And this helps you to develop what's called the next practices. And this brings you to true creativity and innovation in terms of everything that you do. I facilitated hundreds of benchmarking projects. On an average, every single benchmarking project, if you follow a systematic methodology, identifies between 50 to 100 ideas or new practices. And then it's the decision of the stakeholders and the project sponsor to decide which ones to implement, based on their potential impact. So it's an absolutely fantastic approach to improvement. So I'll just show you the final slide. If you want to find out, can we move to the final slide, please? So if you want to find out more about the Global Benchmarking Network and what benchmarking can offer you, obviously I'd like you to attend the whole conference today, but also you can find more information on our website and subscribe to the Global Benchmarking Network's newsletter. So thank you very much indeed for your time, and hopefully you all enjoy the presentations, and I hope to meet you sometime in the Philippines or wherever you are in the world. So thank you very much indeed.